Stick to the shadows, remain undetected, use a disguise, stay silent, and never let the enemy know you are coming. These elements are all synonymous with stealth games, a genre that encourages players to avoid confrontation rather than seek it out. Stealth games are some of the most popular on the market and have become some of the most universally acclaimed in the modern era. Titles like Assassin's Creed, Hitman, Splinter Cell, Dishonored, and Thief have made the art of assassination one of the most desirable things to do in our beloved virtual worlds. Even titles that aren't marketed as stealth games now frequently incorporate stealth modes, like sneaking around with a bow in Skyrim or performing stealth kills in Wolfenstein 2. In today's world of gaming, the core elements of stealth are more pervasive than ever before and are found in an increasing number of places, ranging from RPGs to traditional first-person shooters. Where did it all begin, though? Who or what is responsible for the stealth genre, and what unknowns are buried beneath the surface of gaming history? One title stands out above all others. In 2008, Hideo Kojima was awarded 2 Guinness World Records. One was for creating the highest-selling stealth game on the PlayStation 2, which was Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. The other record, and perhaps the more impressive, was given to Kojima for creating the original Metal Gear, the first game to ever fully utilize stealth. Keep in mind that the hype surrounding MGS4 likely played a part in the attention that he received during that year, but it is worth considering how much of an impact that he actually had on influencing and popularizing the stealth genre. The original Metal Gear was released in 1987, 6 years after other pioneering titles like Castle Wolfenstein. So what makes Kojima and his game so special? Castle Wolfenstein was developed by Muse Software and lead designer Silas Warner. It was released in 1981 for PCs and immediately caught the attention of the gaming community because of its emphasis on avoiding detection. The game did fairly well and gained enough popularity that a sequel called Beyond Castle Wolfenstein was released 3 years later. Unfortunately, Muse shut down shortly after, and the franchise was never heard from again until id revived it with Wolfenstein 3D in 1992 and returned to Castle Wolfenstein in 2001. Even though Castle is seen in hindsight as a prototypical stealth game and one of the very first to do it well, the series lost momentum before it ever reached its full potential. From a gameplay perspective, 1981's Castle Wolfenstein can be seen as a forerunner to Metal Gear. It was played from a top-down perspective, ammunition was rare, and playing stealthily was emphasized above Rambo-style shooting rampages. While Silas Warner was a genius and he was able to create one of the most impressive early stealth games in history, the unfortunate demise of Muse Software meant that his work was never able to popularize the budding stealth genre. Thankfully, an ambitious young developer from Konami's MSX division was placed in charge of a new stealth project in 1986 that lifted the genre's potential to new heights. At this point, I should make it clear that the term stealth game didn't exist in the 1980s. It was not until the late 90s that the term gained enough recognition to garner its own standing when discussed in critical circles and the public sphere that arose during that decade. Remember that gaming in itself was something that nerds or geeks did in their basements during the precursor to cash cow consoles like the Nintendo 64 or the PlayStation. Other genres like RPGs and Doom clones, later to be called first-person shooters, were already well on their way to popularity, but games that emphasized espionage and silence were still years away from public favor. One problem that prevented the advancement of stealth was hardware, something that Hideo Kojima fought to overcome during the 1980s. In 1986, Kojima, after giving up on his dream of working for Nintendo, took a job working for Konami's MSX division and was assigned the duty of heading a new game called Metal Gear. He was immediately disappointed with the MSX2's ability to handle gunfights and combat, so he took inspiration from the 1963 film The Great Escape to create a focus on avoiding confrontation. The result was the first game that ever fully utilized stealth as a way to progress. Alerts, cameras, reconnaissance, and obstacles like electrified floors and hollowed out walls took the place of traditional enemies, and sneakiness became more important than overpowering your enemies. Hell, you even started the game without a weapon and were left to your own abilities and nothing but a codec radio to guide you through dangerous territory. Oddly enough, hardware limitations, for the first time, led to a game in which stealth was more important than combat. Metal Gear was met with a great deal of appraisal from players and critics alike, so much so that it was ported to the NES the very next year. The port was developed by another division of Konami, and Kojima absolutely hated it. The Konami division in charge of porting the game was given the source code from the original version without consent, and they took their own liberties in changing bosses and level designs throughout the entire game, and a programmer on the ported version later even admitted that Konami gave his team a 3-month deadline and were told to change as many things as possible from the original MSX2 version. As a result, Kojima later publicly disowned the Nintendo version because of its inaccuracies and alterations. Without the involvement of Kojima, Nintendo developed and released Snake's Revenge in 1990, which would have been a good time for the franchise to die on the vine. Instead, Kojima developed his own sequel for Metal Gear on MSX2 called Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. So let me make this clear. Hideo Kojima, who hated MSX's hardware capabilities because it didn't allow for actual combat and made a stealth game because of those inefficiencies, hated Nintendo's port so bad that he disowned it, then hated the Nintendo sequel so bad that he used MSX2 to make his own sequel in order to tell Nintendo to kiss his ass. According to Kojima's accounts of the events, he did not have any plans to develop a Metal Gear sequel at the time. He was unaware that Snake's Revenge was being produced until he became acquainted with a member of the development team on a train ride in Tokyo. That employee briefed him on some details of the project and asked him to create a true sequel. By the end of that train ride, Kojima had already envisioned the basic premise for the game. After being given the go-ahead by his bosses at Konami the next day, he began developing Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake with the MSX division of Konami. To be short, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake is the sequel to the original Metal Gear, ignoring the events of Snake's Revenge, which was never even released in Japan. So every canonical Metal Gear title released afterward acknowledged only the events of Metal Gear 2, relegating Nintendo's Snake's Revenge to obscurity in the years that followed. The good news out of all of this is that Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake was actually created, developed, polished, and sold as a tactical espionage game. Where Nintendo had failed, Konami succeeded. Kojima produced a true sequel that included the core gameplay mechanics of the first Metal Gear and improved upon enemy AI, with sensitivity to sound and the ability to kneel, crawl, hide under tables and air ducts, use mine detectors and heat-seeking missiles, but most importantly, the introduction of a prototypical Soliton radar. I would go into the specifics of how Metal Gear 2 also had an incredible story, because that is how Kojima popularized the stealth genre, but I'm not going to do that simply because 1998 changed everything. But I will say this, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake was appraised as one of the best 8-bit games to ever be made, and it all happened because Hideo Kojima hated Konami's MSX hardware, but he hated Nintendo even worse. Following the success of Metal Gear 2, Kojima began development on what he called the best PlayStation game ever, beginning in 1995. He met personally with a California SWAT team and learned the real-life strategies that created tactical espionage. Kojima took every step possible to learn about the combat and tactics that would be the focus of his new game because, according to him, if the player wasn't tricked into believing that the world is real, then there's no point in making the game. Because of the potential confusion that came along with Nintendo and Kojima both making separate sequels to Metal Gear 1, Kojima opted for an entirely new name for the game, and thus, Metal Gear Solid was born. When MGS took the stage at E3 in 1997, it was clear that it would be a game-changing work of art. Hype surrounding the game continued to build, and when it was released in 1998, it was immediately lauded for its gameplay and story. PlayStation Magazine stated that it was the best game ever made. IGN said it was closer to perfection than any other game in PlayStation's action genre, and Computer and Video Games claimed it to be like playing a big-budget action blockbuster, only better. It is this particular quote that reveals more about why and how Metal Gear Solid was able to popularize the stealth genre, and why Hideo Kojima is seen as the originator of stealth. MGS offered a compelling story that enveloped players in a different world. If you hear a Metal Gear critic make a gripe about the franchise, they would normally say, they aren't even games, they're just movies. Well, that's true. They are movies. Really good movies. And that's what sets them apart from other stealth games that were released before 1998. The PS1 was able to handle lots of cutscenes and an entire cast of voice actors who brought the game to life. Sure, Thief had a good story too, but it was a PC exclusive that only sold 500,000 copies in its first 2 years. Metal Gear Solid sold millions and made its way into the homes of console owners across the world, and won the hearts of the majority of the people that played it. The interesting part is that players and critics weren't in love with MGS because of its gameplay, although they certainly enjoyed that part as well. But what they really were enamored with was the narrative, a compelling story about love, death, nuclear proliferation, and the ability of one hero to save the world. Just like Snake Plissken, Solid Snake was a movie star, but he was also a video game character. What all of this meant was that Metal Gear Solid was able to do something that its prequels and its peers hadn't. It gained popular favor and made people invest in another world, thus creating a mass market for stealth games that hadn't existed before 1998. Dishonored, Hitman, Splinter Cell, Assassin's Creed, and many others still follow that mold until this day. Stealth games are about characters and story as much as they are about combat or gameplay. Agent 47, Sam Fisher, Desmond Miles, Altair, and Ezio are all heroes that play a part in their own well-orchestrated cinematic world, and they are very popular for doing so. Hideo Kojima was able to use the capabilities that the PS1 offered to create 3D environments and cinematic cutscenes, and implement a fully voice-acted game. That had never been done before in a stealth game, and it changed the entire genre forever. The fact that MGS was a movie really is the important part of explaining how Kojima popularized the genre and why it's so important to understand his legacy, but making that the only focus would downplay the impact that Metal Gear had on defining gameplay. The most important part of stealth games is normally artificial intelligence. The way that NPCs react to what you do as the player is what makes it feel real. Metal Gear Solid introduced static bots that, while following the same pattern over and over, also reacted to sound and had specific fields of vision that were represented on the Soliton radar. The Genome soldiers would actively hunt you if they were alerted to your presence, and were even smart enough to throw grenades under a table if you were hiding from them. Even though they were the earliest form of bots that you could imagine in a stealth game, the AI made the game feel dynamic in a way that many players had never experienced before. As Snake, you could manipulate the environment around you by knocking on objects to make guards come to you. You could use chaff grenades to disable security cameras and thermal goggles to see laser traps or CryMor mines. All of this was coupled with the game's own minimap that constantly made you aware of things you couldn't necessarily see. Seriously, MGS is the first game that ever made me look at the map in the corner as much as I did the game itself, in the same way that Call of Duty or CSGO do until this very day. It also had remote control missiles that could be switched between first and third person, and the ability to aim down the PSG-1 scope to make you feel like a real sniper. The story, the voice acting, the cinematics, the gameplay, the AI, the soundtrack, everything about the game was really good. Perhaps some of the elements that are a part of MGS had been done before, but no game had ever combined it all into one single experience, and no game had ever did it as close to perfection as Kojima did. After years of dissatisfaction with his own work and the direction of stealth games at large, Kojima reached the pinnacle of tactical espionage in 1998. In doing so, he popularized an entire genre of game that still lives on until this day. True stealth titles have followed the same path that he paved, and incorporated enemy AI into intriguing narratives that have become blockbuster yearly releases. Ubisoft, in particular, owes much of its success to the platform that MGS built, but other games that aren't even identified with a stealth label still make use of the style and architecture that Kojima universalized. The far-reaching effect of his work and the Metal Gear franchise are already endeared by fans across the world, but as students and fans of video game history, it is imperative that we understand how one single game revolutionized a segment of an entire industry. So the next time that you hear from your friends that Metal Gear Solid games are movies, simply nod your head in agreement, because without those fantastic movies, stealth games wouldn't be what they are today. Thank you to our loyal viewers who provide the inspiration and encouragement to make these videos. Without your support, none of this would be possible. I want to know your thoughts about Metal Gear Solid, Hideo Kojima, the current state of Konami, and how you personally feel about the influence that the franchise had. If I'm wrong, tell me. I would love to hear your opinion, so shout at me in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, you can help me by sharing it, for which I would be eternally grateful. If you liked it, leave a like. If you don't like it, don't like it. But if you did, you can watch another video up there in the corner, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.